following story of her experience of 2 weeks stay in the Nash clothing factory is written by Ruth White Colton, also appeared in Success magazine in September 1922. It appears here by the permission of the publishers of that magazine. It is a genuine picture of the conditions as Mrs. Colton found them and not a mere piece of impressionistic journalism. Its value lies precisely in this fact and earns for its place in this story of the Golden Rule in operation. On board the Cincinnati Special, May 17, 1922. 20 odd years of working and playing with, and for man and woman, boys and girls, may not add either to one's international reputation, nor yet to one's bank account. It does give one certain conviction, the one which I hold against all corners, is that you can't standardize humans. But balanced against the convictions are few unanswered, if not unanswerable questions. The chief of these, and it has haunted, tantalized, tormented me, is why when we all need one another so vitally, men and women, high and low, rich and poor, capital and labor, why, I say, cannot we pull in double harness? For and until we do learn the blessedly simple rule of give and take, divorce, strikes, wars must be our idiotically unnecessary lot. For a month I had watched, read, and studied for afar the attempt of one man to put that simple rule into practical operation. This man is Arthur Nash, maker of men's clothing, who, beginning with a tiny shop, employing 29 workers, has now the largest organization of its kind in the world. 3.5 years ago, Mr. Nash started this business with the conviction that until right human relationship was established between employer and employed, between the producer and consumer, no progress could ever be made out of the morass of the industrial and social conditions in which our own country and indeed the whole human family had been struggling. This conviction was and is based upon the premise that God's law was given to the man through Jesus Christ, is alone the eternally sure foundation upon which to build. Do unto others as ye that they should do unto you. For this is the law and the prophets. This law is as potent today as it was when Jesus gave it to the man, and is as applicable to any industrial problem as to any social or religious question, and to his determination to conduct a little tailoring shop on the law. Mr. Nash ascribes alone the extraordinary growth of his organization, for during these 3.5 years, admittedly the most turbulent in the history of one of the most troublesome industries in the world, the one-time shop with 29 workers is now employing over 2,000 people and is occupying what used to be one of the largest breweries in the country, now converted into a clothing factory. All this without strikes or disturbances of any sort, but with the increasingly improved conditions for both the employer and the employed, and incidentally a growing confidence and satisfaction upon the part of the consumer. And now at last here I am going as fast as extra fare train can carry me to find out, if possible, what the company thinks and feels about it. And to do this I know the way is to be one of the company. Ruth White Colton, of more or less acquirements, is going to bed in lower 5, car 63, bound for Cincinnati. But it will be Hattie Clark, unknown, jobless, having $20 in her pocket, will beg for a job at the Golden Rule factory tomorrow morning. What answer will she find? That answer, whatever it is, she means to set down fairly and honestly, as fast as it comes to her, the truth and the whole truth. 1419 Elm Street, May 18. Here long and humbly to the address above, for it represents my first and perhaps greatest triumph, a home. And don't imagine that it was easily achieved. YWCA, all full, miles upon miles, and imposing rooming houses, flaunting inviting signs, only to dampen one's enthusiasm by all taken, when one inquires. And at last this, a big front room in what must once have been a mansion, but whose parlor at present has been converted to a barber's shop. The proprietor, a young southern boy, and his little wife, who calls me honey, are the host and the hostess of the abode. I may, if I choose, do light housekeeping. I have bought me a red and white tablecloth, and go now to a 10-cent store for a coffee pot, cup, and saucer. What more could heart desire? And all of this time I haven't told you that I have a job. A nice-looking boy directed me to the forelady of West Department, where he's sure I would get a job, and if I hadn't gotten one, it would have been worth the piece of the trip, have had the half hours of talk on girls, work, life with the little lady. Her questions were to humans, so kindly and so keen, and her desire to help me was so sincere, and it was inspiring. Had I ever sewed? Yes, at home. Did I understand power machines? No, but I know I could learn. Oh, of course. But I wondered that how fast you could go ahead. $10 isn't much, unless you look at it as pay while you learn. I said I'm glad I could have any kind of a start. She asked that I had ever done any floor work. Lord, but that was a facer. Thinking of the many times that I have washed floors, I almost said yes. But anyhow, I guessed it right and said no. Well, I do need help with the girls themselves. I look after their work, their health, and their happiness. Or try to, and they are getting so many. It's beyond me. I gasped health and happiness and said, well, I have done a lot of practical nursing and girls' club work. Would that help? Great. I think we need you as much as you need us. And if you can start from tomorrow at $10 as a learner, I'll take the other up with Mr. Nash when he returns. Would I give her my name and address? One Gap and Mrs. Hattie Clark, said I, 1419 Elm Street. And with the nicest grasp on my hand, I found myself dismissed. Now, for an alarm clock, I'll feel myself really settled. My workday, Mrs. Reslin tells me, begins at 7:30 with 3/4 of an hour for lunch and ends at 4:15. No work on Saturday. So, at least one of my doubts, the reality of the 40-hour week, was answered. May 19. 24 hours ago, I thought I had a home. Tonight, thanks to God and the realist proof of living and working by the golden rule, and I know I have one, and aching back the echoes of the whirring machines and the still tense nerves from my first day in the Wests must not keep me from putting into words the experience of the last 24 hours. The little home that I had found so joyously, despite of the cleanest and fairest surfaces, proved to be infested with vermin, and half an hour after I have gone to bed, homesick and exhausted, I was out of my bed, dressing at the topmost speed and flying at the most abject terror I have ever known to the sheltering arms of WYCA. Heaven alone knows that what would have happened had they not had a room to give me, for I did not know a soul in this blessed city unless I were to make known myself to Mr. Nash, and this I determined not to do unless driven to it. Even the scalding hot bath and exquisite cleanliness of my little room could not quite my shaken nerves, and it was almost morning when I fall asleep. And it seemed, but it was a flash when I was again awakened by my newly acquired alarm clock. Another bath, breakfast up near the factory, and then my day really began. And what day it has been. Word quickly flew through the shop of my hectic first night in Cincinnati and my homeless and friendless condition. And at lunchtime, literally a dozen of girls were offering me a room, money, or anything I might need. But it was Rose with her 2 rooms and little 13-year-old daughter, who completely took my heart when she said, "Now, Hattie, you come right to the home with me. We ain't got much, but I see to you liken when I see you yesterday." And I says to marry her, that woman can have half of whatever I've got. Do you imagine that I could go anywhere else? Now we had have a supper and chatted a while, and I know the hardest part of this job will be leaving these dear fellows who have accepted me so unquestioningly into their lives. The mere job is not going to be very difficult for the master. at least sufficiently well for my purpose, and the quickness that which I was able to catch on, which was entirely due to the patience of our forelady and the good-natured girls around me. Before I tumbled into bed beside Rose, who was already peacefully sleeping in the next room, I must admit that I did not walk off of all the honors of the A. Nash Company today. During the afternoon, a ripple of interest seemed to sweep over the shop, and I said to the girl opposite, "What's up?" "The boss," she said. And sure enough that there was Mr. Nash, with a young woman to whom he appeared to showing over the works. After half an hour, suddenly all the machines stopped. Mrs. Rusland told us that we all were wanted to be down in the courtroom. So down we all piled up, and there, sitting on the edges of the tables, standing and lounging, were gathered of the whole company, and on a table in our midst stood the company song leader and Jinx. "Didn't we have a whooping good sing?" I said to one of a man standing near me. "I am new to this. Do we get this often?" "Gee, yes, couple of times a month." Anyways, I would have liked to ask him some more questions, but the boss was on the table and was telling us about the outing to Chester Park. On the 3rd, the latest plans of the Cedar Point, which of the more later, a plea for rooters for the ball game tomorrow. And in all this, there was a rapid fire of questions and answers going on between A. Nash and company. If there is a feeling of a barrier between man and girls and Arthur Nash, it is certainly not apparent upon the surface. Nor did our young visitor, Miss Jeanskin, New York, seem to have found any. For when Mr. Nash helped her up to the table beside him, and she said, "I hope you all will have a wonderful time at Cedar Point, and I believe that you will. That's all I want to say. And now for bed. 2 whole days for freedom. For Saturday, it's a home day for the workers of the Golden Rule Company. May 21. Sunday afternoon. My first 2-day loof is almost over, and I'm all alone. Rose and her little daughter are away for the afternoon, and I have an hour or 2 ahead. Yesterday, while Rose washed and little Mary cleaned up, I explored the city. And may I say right here that 69.7% of the cops, newsies and car conductors know and love Arthur Nash. How did I know? Because I know many of them told me so. Every one of these I've seen in my wandering. I've asked to direct me to the factory, saying that I was a stranger and just have got the job. And every single one of them said, "Say, ma'am, you are in luck," or "That is the grandest place to work in this city. Did you see the boss? He's a white man. That's the fellow we call Golden Rule. Nash is a regular fellow. I wish I had a mental stenographic department to take them all down." And Rose, who had worked in rooming houses, sporty hotels, factories and stores, and who worked for the past 3 years, has worked up from the beginning for the A. Nash Company. What did she say? It is, I think, the best demonstration of Arthur Nash, who gave to his folks, that anyone could possibly make. It make no difference to that man whether you were black or white, Jew or Catholic, or one of the Adventists. He'd treat you just like his own sister. And, to tell the truth, we ain't got a nerve, not to try to do the same. May 24. The week thus far has been rather uneventful in the Wests, getting slack, and the girls say it's hard to keep up their speed. Nevertheless, it is remarkable how loafing on job there is. Even now, I said so to a nice floor lady, and she said, "You know, Miss Clark, we don't ever have such trouble that ways. We ladies feel like this business is most as much ours as it is Mr. Nash's, and we try to do what's best for all." It is more than ever apparent that the Golden Rule works both ways. May 25. 4 of our lining girls were away today, so one of the trimmers was transferred to the machines next to me. She's a gay little thing and so pretty. I asked her if she liked her job, and she said, "Sure thing." I said, "I thought we had very nice in the shop." And she said, "Yes, there is a very nice class of girls works here, and Mrs. Rusland grant to us. It is very hot in the shop, but we work amidst bangs and rattles of the workmen, who are up roof awnings and installing cool air fans. May 26. It has been a thrilling day at A. Nash factory, and Hattie Clark has her own personal share in the thrills. It was the payday, and I had never received any money with all my satisfaction when Mrs. Rusland handed me my check for $6 for 3 days. Then at the quarter of 4 o'clock, as just we were all spending up our half-last hour, the machines stopped, and amid the unexpected silence, Mrs. Rusland told us that Mr. Nash has some announcements to make, and we all were down to the coat shop. There we all gathered, 600 or more men and women, and sang together while we waited for Mr. Nash. When he came, he made several announcements for the ball game, our coming outing, and the Cedar Point trip. And then he announced that his oldest son is to be married to the secretary of the company at noon tomorrow at the cutting room, and we were all invited to be there. This thing in itself is so characteristic of the spirit of friendliness that prevails. It makes one wonder that how other industries have missed so simple yet so vital method of securing loyalty. And now, the most astonishing and dramatic appeal that I have ever listened to. It appears that about 6 weeks ago, the cashier of the A. Nash Company was held up and robbed with the weekly payrolls. The bandit, or one of them, has been found and is to be sentenced, and some of the workers have come to Mr. Nash and told him that they have heard that this man has a wife and 4 little children, and they would be the real sufferers. And they wanted, who are also the part owners of the company, whose payroll this man stole, they asked Mr. Nash that to think up some way that those 4 children could be helped. And in return, Mr. Nash reported this request to all of us and asked what action we wished to take. There were suggestions of many kinds, and the hands went into the pockets as the men and women urged Mr. Nash to assume names for the care of these future citizens. Finally, a big motherly-looking lady climbed upon the table and said she thought that the company could put the mother on the payroll of $20 a week, provided the mother would take care of the children and make a home for them. This she put in a form of a motion, and then, to my overwhelming surprise, a woman from the West shop spoke up and said, "Mr. Nash, if we are to give this money, and I hope we do, I think that there should be someone to kind of look after that little family and see to it that the money is given to them each week and it's spent to right of those children. And I'd like to suggest a lady who has come into the West shop just a little while ago. She has done nursing and has 3 little girls of her own, and who has in this short time endeared herself to all of us. I'd like to say that I think Mrs. Hattie would be the person to help that woman to get her on her feet." Well, I could have cried. I felt so happy and so astonished. And those 600 men and women who, in 7 short weeks, had never laid eyes on me, actually voted to do this amazing thing and entrust their goodwill and their money into my keeping. During the noon hour today, as I stood with some of the girls watching the men play ball, they pointed out to me Mr. Camillo, the foreman of the coat shop, and I said, "Oh, he's the one the amalgamated knocked so hard. What's the matter with him? He looks all right." "He's all right," said one of the women, "and I guess I ought to know. I have worked with him ever since he was here, and he thinks the world and all of his girls. We gets our rights as long as Camillo is the boss." The meeting and the decision to make me the chairman of the company to look after the children certainly came as an answer to my prayers, for I have been wrecking on my brains to find a way out of the West shop into the coat shop and to Mr. Nash himself. And this committee's work have opened the way for both. For by the best of luck, the 2 names that were suggested to aid me were that of splendid little woman from the coat shop and Dr. Moore, who was really close to Mr. Nash. After the meeting has discharged, Mr. Nash asked the committee to meet him in his office, and there he repeated to us that he had already said upstairs that it was the children and only children with whom we were concerned, but that it was his belief that in being to give a chance to make a good home for the little ones, the mother herself could not help but be given an incentive to be her best and truest. How far-reaching the influence of these men and women of the A. Nash Company is almost beyond estimation. They have to lead them, that rarest of things, a practical idealist, that together he and they are actually living. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven is the most blazingly apparent fact to anyone who has privilege of living and working with them. May 27, 1922. I have just come home from the wedding, the young Nash and the girl who has worked her way up from the position of a clerk to the secretaryship of this great company. I wonder if any of the young people before had loving, good wishes of so large and varied a family. For nearly 1,000 girls and boys, men and women, who have worked and played with these two gathered in the big cutting room of the factory to see them made man and wife and to wish them Godspeed in their great adventure. So simple and so beautiful was the service. I know was not one of us who witnessed it, who did not share, and the benefit by the love and goodwill that abounded. May 29. My story is written, and Hattie Clark, Westmaker, is no more. Friday and Saturday of last week were so crowded with vital happenings within the A. Nash Company, family and to my own position, that one of us is so secure that I felt this morning that it would be wasting time for me to sit at a power machine no longer. And so, when Mrs. Ruslan came into the shop and we had a quiet moment, before the whistle blew, I asked her if she could call a meeting of the workers this afternoon, because I had a confession to make to them. Her amazement was most apparent, but she unhesitatingly said, "Certainly. Hattie, what is the trouble?" "Well, dear Mrs. Ruslan, won't you hear my confession first? It has never before occurred that I have been much as an actress, but that complete and surprised bewilderment for my dear little forelady makes me feel that if all else fails, there is still another profession open for me." Of course, she had 1,000 questions to ask of me, and I believe that she was equally divided to her emotions between gratitude that someone at last really was going to give the truth concerning the A. Nash Company to the public, and utter astonishment that such a greenhorn Westmaker should have put one over her in her own shop. We decided she and I will also take Dr. Moore and the much maligned Camelot of the coat shop into confidence, and that these three would call the meeting. I wish I had the power to describe the effect upon these two men when I told them who I was and why I was here. No one can know, I suppose, how long a way a man of Camelot's type must have travelled to be able, for the sake of an ideal, to remain silent under such groundless criticism that has been levelled against him. I do believe that it is not enough that these good people should know that they are right. I believe that earnest men and women on this land should have their faith fortified. And so the meeting was called, and it was Hattie Clark's turn to climb upon the coat shop table. Dr. Moore opened the meeting by saying, "A spy has been found among us." She had confessed, but asked for to be given a chance so that she could tell her story at the workers' meeting before sentence was passed upon her, and so because we believe in giving even a spy a square deal, we let Mrs. Hattie Clark to tell us how and why she has been working with us under a name with not our own, and then we will try to decide that what can we do about it. I told them my story just as I tried to tell it here, in a hope that they might see, as they have perhaps never before seen, what a wonderful thing, how far-reaching in its efforts upon millions of workers like themselves, their steadfastness to their ideal might be. I had not gone far before I began to get interrupted by relieved bursts of laughter, clapping of hands. "And you ain't no spy, Hattie." "You are all right, Hattie," one man called from the floor. I move the verdict be not guilty. May 31. A verdict of not guilty, and my freedom. Freedom to wander, to foot rule, a notebook in hand, in a true professional investigator style, from the one end of a factory to the other one. Freedom to question, to even the foremen and so-called officials, to whom I have till now religiously avoided lest I be later be accused of Cotton My Story from them. It's been wonderful 44 hours and the notebook is filled with unnecessarable proof of the splendid conditions existing in the factory with plans of